We wanted to make sure that every time you load a new map, it's a surprise, it's fresh. And it's one thing to do that with the color palette and the atmosphere of the scene. It's another thing to do that with the narrative and also the gameplay mechanics. When you think back to your favorite games, that's what you remember. You remember those amazing moments in the games. And video games, just as a medium, are so potent in how they can create memorable moments. They engage you so deeply.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlog Banter. My name is Tucker Hazell, and this is Dev Dive, a show where I get a chance to talk to interesting game developers about their games. And today, we have Matt Nava here with Giant Squid Studios making Sword of the Sea, a game that I have now played through. I've been looking forward to for a long time. I actually have a reaction to the reveal trailer on my channel where I'm like, yes, I can't wait, yes. Oh, yes, Sword of the Sea.
Sword of the Sea, that looks good.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, this just shot up my most anticipated. And now it's here, and I get to talk to you about the game, which 2 years ago when the game was revealed, I don't think I would have believed that I would get the chance. But I've got plenty of questions, and I'm really, really excited to have you on here to talk about this third game from you and your studio. You know, you've had well over a decade of experience in the industry. There's a lot to dig into here.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, you are the first one that I've got a chance to talk to that I got to play their game way ahead of launch, because I met you at Summer Game Fest and I played a little bit of Sword of the Sea at a demo there at Playdays, and so it's a first for me in a different way that I'm then getting to experience the game in a demo and then down the line on full release.
Yeah, and there's been, we squeezed in a lot of little fixes even since that demo.
Ooh, okay.
So, yeah, excited.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we get too deep into the game itself, I want to introduce people to a little bit more of your history before you even get to Giant Squid. So I want to look back to when you got into the industry for the first time. Where did you start working on games? What's that sort of Matt Nava superhero origin story like?
Yeah, man. I went to school for digital media, visual arts as a kind of animation concept artist focus. Mm-hmm. I thought I was going to be in visual effects for, the movie industry or something. And then accidentally met Genova Chen, who was the creative director at that game company, at my senior show where we, as students, we show our work to industry professionals at the school I went to in LA, at Otis College of Art and Design. And ended up working at that game company on Flower, which was one of their early games. Came in halfway through that project, helped them finish it up, and just kind of learned that I really enjoyed making video games. And it was such a fun, interesting space. Then I worked on Journey as the art director. After that team kind of all went their own different ways, and I started Giant Squid, and we made Abzu, the Pathless, and now Sword of the Sea.
Yeah, and I love that story because as someone who has played all of those games, I feel the progression. I feel the journey, literally, that you have been taking in learning your skills and honing your craft and learning what you appreciate in games, because all of these games share a style, a tone, and it's one that I resonate with on a very personal level. I'm also curious what you think these games that you've worked on, with their unique tone and the unique identity that and art style that you bring to your games, what do you think Matt Nava's games bring to the games industry? What makes a Matt Nava game a Matt Nava game, like stands out from the rest of the crowd? Do you have like a philosophy that you think about? It's like, I'm trying to bring something special or new to the industry?
Yeah, it's weird because they do look a little different than a lot of games out there, and they're trying to do things in a different way. And there's so many wonderful video games, and I always think about like, what can I do to bring something interesting and fresh to this space? That's what is unique to my skill set that isn't really being explored. Every game, kind of starts as an intuitive idea of visuals for the movement, for the gameplay, the feel. Only after I've completed a few games have I kind of looked back and been like, oh, I can see the relationship too. Like everybody thinks like, oh, he's got a plan, but it's like, I'm moving intuitively. And then you kind of look back and it's like looking in the mirror and you see like, oh, this is who I am, and then that gives you kind of an insight that you take on to the next one. And so every time I look at one of those games, I'm thinking, what really felt natural for me when I was building it? What felt like that was coming from the heart? and how can I take that further? How can I do that better? How can I refine that and improve that and do a new version of it that explores another facet of it? And what, was the kind of experiment that we want to shift, and what, so every single one you can kind of see there's a little similarity and then there's something new, and they're all just this kind of exploration of our identity as artists, and it's become really my vision, but also the team at Giant Squid. They all have a big part in this. So,
Well, yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, a game of this spectacle and scope and complexity, you can't make by yourself. That would be crazy. And so you've got a team of artists working with you, and I'm curious what that process is like of finding collaborators that share your vision, that bring their own perspective to what you're creating, but share a need to create something that is in this sort of vein. And so when you're looking to bring someone new onto the team, or maybe someone that you brought onto the team while making Sword of the Sea, what is that spark you're looking for in people that is the Giant Squid idea, core in the center there?
It's been challenging to find the right crew, but there's been people with us for many years now, and it's just really an alignment on what you care about in the video game world. It's challenging because at the outset these projects sound crazy. Like I'm telling everybody, like, you're going to surf on a sword in a world that's animating and wavy, and there's nothing like that. So you're asking people to imagine something and to take a leap of faith.
Yeah.
And they all can do that. They can all, say, okay, I trust you, and I'll go through the process to understand the vision, because, the art direction is trying to look like a painting or a concept art, or, we're not trying to emulate photorealism. And so the target is amorphous. Like, it has to be explained. You can't just say, like, make it look more realistic or add more detail. Like, in order to do that, in order to improve the work, you have to kind of say, like, it needs to look more like this kind of style,
Sure.
and so they have to get a feeling, and it happens after years of building trust, that people can kind of just intuitively understand what we're shooting for. And we're very fortunate that we have several, incredible people doing the art specifically, and they really do have that intuition now that we've been working so long together. And incredibly grateful to have such a talented team.
Yeah, of course. And what I liked about what you said about bringing something new to not only the industry but to your games is that none of these games, the five that you mentioned, feel the same. They don't. They might share a similar saturated color palette, a similar maybe cell shaded art style, but and the music is similar by same composer across the course of them. What was it with Sword of the Sea in particular that was different from the other games that you made that you felt like you still had the space to explore? Do you remember that initial idea where you feel like we haven't done this before? We should explore that further, to the point where it's a game that you not only put your whole team's effort behind, but half a decade's worth of time.
When we were making Sword of the Sea, we kind of knew that people were going to look at it and immediately be able to see the kind of things that came before, and it's like, oh yeah, it reminds me of Journey. Oh yeah, it reminds me of Abzu, and more subtly, it reminds you of the Pathless and the movement. Like the visuals hit you, and those are like, okay, I see that. But then when you play it, you realize it's really about that movement, and exploring that in a way that builds on the movement we designed for the Pathless was a really interesting space for us and for me. And Abzu was this very atmospheric, artsy game. Pathless was much more gamey. It had boss fights, you're shooting arrows, it's an open world.
It's funny, actually. I had someone who saw that I was playing the game message me on Discord the other night and say, oh, how are the boss fights in Sword of the Sea as compared to the Pathless? I'm like, well, do you want me to tell you? Like, clearly you don't know a lot about this game, but it's interesting to think that you're in some way kind of going back, quote unquote, on what you did before, because this game isn't an exact continuation of what you did in the Pathless. This isn't as action focused.
Right, exactly. And at first we thought, like, oh, it was like we're charting a linear path from Abzu, Pathless, Swordsea is going to be even more that way. But what I realized some way through development was that it's more like a pendulum swinging. It's like we did this small game, we did this big game. What were the things we loved in both of those? Those are both aspects of us. How could we do something that was even more true to who we are and explore the best parts of all of what we've learned about ourselves? And so, yeah, I think that that was such an interesting and fun space for us to really explore. And I think that, it's a highlight in the game, just the smoothness of the movement and all of that. So
No, absolutely, yeah. And the idea of it being a merging point between a lot of the ideas that you've explored in the past, and that's not to say that the game, especially in its movement, as we'll talk about, doesn't have its own ideas that are pushing your studio forward. But compared to the other projects you've worked on, you're right that this has much more obvious touchstones from Journey, from Abzu, from the Pathless. And I'm curious where in the development you decided that this was going to be in some way, I think, very clearly evoking these other projects that you've worked on, as opposed to like, you play the Pathless and maybe there's like a little Easter egg or something to one of these older games, but this is in the camera work, in the dunes of sand. It's pulling in Journey, in the flowing scarf that one of the characters has. It's invoking Abzu in literally many of these same fish models and the shark statues and the kelp strands that are going off. Like I've played Abzu. I know where that came from.
yeah,
Where was it that you were like, not only should we take inspiration from these previous projects, but in some ways literally adopt aspects and reutilize them in this new context? What was that process like of deciding that that was going to be something you were leaning on?
Yeah, I mean, early on, we built these games. We spent all this time
Yeah.
making this tech,
We've got these fish models on the hard drive.
Yeah, we've got this amazing asset, We have this incredible library of fish and custom technology to render kelp and have it wave and all this stuff. And it's like, let's use it, man. Let's do something cool with it. Let's take it further, And so we took those systems and we expanded on them. Again, it's like another facet. Like we made the kelp interactive. It's an interactive gameplay object, In Abzu, you would swim through the kelp and it was this like experiential like thing. It just reacts to you as pushing away from all the fish and all that stuff, and it like makes it atmosphere. In this game, you're looking at the kelp and it's all of a sudden it's doing that, but it's also you're a part of your path you're charting. You're imagining, okay, I can go up that. I can get from here to there using it. And that was really, I think, a fun part of it was we wanted the world itself to become the thing that you are thinking about in the gameplay, like moment to moment. Like it's not just a beautiful scene. It's also something that you are charting as you go.
Sure,
and
yeah.
every moment you're thinking, I'm going to be able to jump off that wave. I'm going to be able, so those elements have, a kind of a double role, and that's really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. One element that I was trying to pull into my mind is, where's the touchstone to Flower? As a game that you also worked on, I was like, where in Sword of the Sea? Okay, I've got the Journey, I've got the Abzu, I've got the Pathless. Where does Flower fit into this? And the thing I came up with, and I don't know if this is intentional or even frankly accurate, is that the flowing paths of fish in the sky that can lead you to your next destination once you've unleashed an ocean seed. That reminds me of the way that the petals track paths in
Absolutely.
Flower.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's intentional or not, but I like created that narrative in my mind that, okay, that's the Flower inspiration in Sword of the Sea.
Yeah, there's definitely that. And also, we have these little clusters of lanterns that you touch on the ground and then
That's
you
a great
activate.
point. Oh,
Which is
that's
like,
so true.
very similar to the way you activate things in Flower by touching all the little flowers on the ground, So there's parallels everywhere. And like some of those, like, I'm just doing it because this is just good game design, And then you realize later, you're like, oh yeah, it was a very similar solution to the same kind of problem we had to solve in the previous game. It worked there, it worked here. And, it's got its own kind of identity now in a new light. And it's fun to make those connections for sure.
Yeah. It's also fun, I'm sure, for you as a designer to have learned from things that you did in the past. Not only, oh, that was a good idea, we can reuse that, but what you did wrong or what you think you could do better from previous projects. And so thinking about Abzu and the Pathless as the games you were creative director on, what were the things that you, looking back at those two projects, that you think that's not exactly right? Like, I can do a little bit better here, and then apply that to making Sword of the Sea. Were there any mistakes you made on those previous games that you thought you could fix while going into a new project?
Oh yeah, man. I mean, every single game, just being an artist, you're never done. It's just a deadline comes and you run out of money. And you have to be like, okay, I guess we're shipping it now. But you can always see something that you would have done differently or you would like to polish more. But at a certain point, like there's diminishing returns to that,
Sure.
and becomes more important to get it in the hands of players. And I think that every game that I've worked on has some aspect of that. And it really comes down to just, I don't think people really know this about video games, but in my experience, you work on it for years and it really comes together right at the end when you're able to think about that level of stuff. Like, oh, let's get the little polished things. Let's get the
Sure.
little details to feel good. And like, that's what happened in Sword of the Sea. We were able to get that time and to, at the very last couple months, polish it up, and just a totally different experience if you're able to get that. And every game gets more or less of that. So I'm very lucky that we were able to get enough this time, and I think that it just makes a world of difference for the player.
Yeah. Well, so what are some of those little details that you're really proud of? Is there any elements of the game's design or things that you really pulled together at the last second that you can share a story on? Really, it making a difference, something that maybe people wouldn't notice if they're just playing it and they don't know what it was like 5 months before it came out. What were those little touches that you really think make the game sing?
Oh man, yeah. In a game like this, there's the character movement is a huge complex piece of code and animation and effects, and it has to be smooth. Like every transition from him in the air to on the ground to on the half pipe going sideways in the air, like there are just so many places where you have a custom animation that plays for like 3 frames, and like that has to be there in order to not take you out. And we were just getting every little transition to feel just right. And the half pipes in particular are very smooth and just a really complex amount of state changes for that character as he flies through the air. And what if he lands on the ground? What you go up the side, you go out of half pipe. What if he lands on the ground sideways? What happens? He has to roll. So we had to come up with like a rolling landing. And other games like in Tony Hawk, he would have like bailed and he would have fallen off the board. And so we came up with this thing like, well, what do we do in a state where you would bail in other games? Like, okay, he just does like the forward roll from like Ocarina of Time, and he just keeps going. And so, yeah, you don't even predict that stuff, but then at the last second, you can fix it. It feels great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously those are things that as a player you don't know that was once missing. that was
Yeah,
things that you had to figure out, because it's like, well, no, that's just what the character does. And you're like,
just feels
no,
right.
it's not what the character just does. We had to
You
figure
have
it
to think
out.
about everything. It is
Yeah.
wild. Yeah.
Well, especially in a game that uses a very different movement system than what you've worked on in the past. I imagine a lot of the work that went into Sword of the Sea is figuring out how to design a game with this movement. Not only just getting the movement right, but then how does that impact level design? How does that impact progression? How does that impact the speed of the music if that's impacted by it? And so, what were the games that maybe you used as touchstones? You mentioned something like Tony Hawk or Ocarina of Time. Were there games that you were playing yourself to get a sense of what the feel of momentum or going off of slopes would feel like, as something that, again, you had it designed yourself before but has been done in other contexts? What were those design touchstones that maybe you were experiencing that you then informed Sort of the Sea with?
Yeah, I love the old snowboarding games, 1080 snowboarding. I love
Sure.
Wave Race.
Still to this day, I think that's the most impressive water I've ever seen in a video game. Wave Race 64. I'm like, how do you do that?
How
What
do
the
they do
heck?
that? Yeah, it's amazing. And they just had something special. And I think that, the feeling of those games was really an inspiration. If you go back and you play them, they're from a different era and they have a different sensibility. And so we had to kind of be like, well, what if a game like that was made today? Like, what would it feel like? But you talked about how that movement system affects the level design, and that was a really challenging thing in this project too. Just how do you make a level that isn't, you can actually navigate with this super fast character, and it never feels like you're in a space and you're going too fast or you're out of control or whatever, because you go into like small interiors, and then you are out in expansive, huge spaces, and making it so that it just felt like it's natural the way he speeds up and slows down, and you never feel like you're kind of slogging through a place. It took a long time to tune that up and get his speed right, how he accelerates on different surfaces, what surfaces are where everywhere in the game, and also making it so that you can explore the space and not get lost without a map.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That's a whole thing that, like, in our previous game on Pathless, that was a big idea. And it's like, it's an open world game with no map and you don't need it. And we had this like sonar effect the character could like use to like kind of search for secrets. There's nothing like that in this game. So we like took out all this gamey stuff, and you still can figure your way out through the world without getting lost. Challenging.
No, definitely. I mean, and one thing I thought was interesting about this, again, as someone who's pretty deeply familiar with these previous games, is that this, one of the elements I think it retains the most from the Pathless is that sense of rewarding exploration, right? Is there are secrets in Journey and Abzu, but certainly not as much as there are collectibles in Pathless or Sword of the Sea. And this is kind of a middle ground where there's the obvious things that you're collecting, the little triangle gems, I don't know what they're called. Then there are also really hidden secrets in this game where it's off way out in the distance. Like, how the hell do I get over there? And so what was that process like of deciding how much extra content and secrets and hidden areas to find? It might structurally look like Abzu or Journey, but it has the hidden depth around the edges of something like the Pathless.
Exactly. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's one of those aspects of, we look back at the projects and we're like, what did we really love about this? And one of the things that we really loved about the Pathless was just how rewarding it was to explore every little corner of this world. And as a player, you have this intuition like, what if I go and jump on the top of that little statue,
Mm-hmm.
And then the game says, yes, that was cool, like it rewards you. And we wanted to do that again, in this game, and give players like a really legitimate reason to go explore these worlds and to have fun doing so, make it really rewarding to invest yourself into this world and make it worth your while.
Well, I think it's especially true because I think that the best moments of the game for me were when I was pushing myself in my knowledge of the movement to find these hidden secrets. It's because a lot of the time, it's once you've mastered it and you are going incredibly high in the air, or you are going way off into the distance on something you didn't think you could land on. That's when the game, I think, stretches, and for me, it feels its most full, is when I can't believe I did that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I think we had this realization on Pathless where we had kind of paths in the Pathless.
False advertising.
Right. Like we had this one that we expected you to find and take, but it felt really fun when, as a player, you felt like you subverted that, like you outsmarted the designers and you found a path, a shortcut, that may or may not have been intended. And in Sword of the Sea, as you play the game, you realize that you can do these jumps that are tremendously huge.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it makes you think back to the earlier levels and you're like, wait a minute, could I use that there? And then there's just so much opportunity to kind of take those learnings and play those levels and find some extra cool stuff. And we're still finding stuff like that ourselves. Like, oh my God, we had stuff in the game where it's like, I think you're going to be able to jump on this, but I've never been able to do it myself. Let's put a secret up there just in case someone gets it,
Sure.
And then after it launched, I was like, oh, I did it. I finally did it myself. And so it's like, I'm glad I put that there. So yeah, well, very excited to see what people can do.
Yeah, totally. And you mentioned learning more about the movement and then thinking back to the older levels and thinking, could I do that in that area? What would that unveil? But another element of this game is there is actually character progression in that you unlock abilities for your character to improve their traversal. There are a couple that are required in moments in the story, but primarily when I think about the traversal in this game, the upgrades, it is the collectibles that you get that are optional that give you pretty cool movement abilities. And I'm curious about the decision to make them optional. And even by the time, even if you've, as I did, fairly thoroughly played through the game, you're not gonna have anywhere near all of them when you finish the game for the first time. And so, for those movement upgrades, why did you choose to make them optional as opposed to required through the progression of the game? And was there a moment when they were required and then they became not? Like, what was that decision like of choosing that to be stuff that some and probably even most players will never even experience?
Yeah. Always a tough choice there, to like spend a lot of time making something that's optional. But the more that you do that, the more rewarding that optional thing is for the players who invest time.
No, that's fair because a lot of the time when there's a reward for like getting a bunch of the game and it's just like a JPEG or whatever, like you just get a picture, people are like, well, that was worthless. Like it just make them mad at the game. But if you put something super, super cool that frankly could have been in the base game or like, in the core of the game, then people are like, oh my God, I can't believe they locked this behind getting all of these
Yeah,
collectibles.
you want it to be, valuable to some degree, and defining how far we could, you know, go with those was a question that it took a long time to figure out. For a long time it was like, oh, I don't think we could manage to like add something of that scope or whatever. But we were able to design a few abilities that actually have a pretty impactful effect on how you play the game. I don't know if you play the new game plus mode, but
Not yet.
yeah, check it out because we unlock an ability there. You can do the tricks, and then that generates boosts.
Uh,
And so all of a
oh
sudden,
no.
it's insane. Yeah, you got to check it out. It's like a
Oh
whole nother
no.
game. And
That's very interesting.
yeah, and that particular ability was so cool. And we were going to make it like, oh, that's the last one you earned. But we realized we want more people to be able to play this,
Yeah, yeah.
And so we changed that one to be you unlock it on New Game Plus, and so there's a much higher percentage of people who will see that one. So we were very choosy about which abilities you unlock by exploring the world, and which are on New Game Plus. And I think that the speedrunners are gonna. It's up to them how they figure out what kind of run categories and stuff. But there's a lot of potential interesting um, fun ways to play the game in a new way in New Game Plus.
Yeah, totally. Um, the thing that makes me think about is with now that I know, because I actually didn't know about because I haven't played New Game Plus yet. I didn't know about that boost element, but it makes me think about the game, the way the game is designed with a lot of set pieces. There are these open explorative areas, but there also are moments when you are riding on the shark or the dolphin or things that are a little bit more scripted in terms of being more cinematic. And so with you and your team, what's the design process like when you decide to make a new level, a new set piece, a new area in the game? Where do you start in terms of your mindset of adding a new chunk to the game?
We were looking back on Abzu, and something I think that's really a strong point of that game is kind of what you're talking about. Like it is a series of moments that are unique, memorable. They have their own color scheme. They have their own vibe. And we wanted to bring that back. We wanted to make sure that every time you load a new map, it's like it's a surprise. It's fresh. And it's one thing to do that with the color palette and the atmosphere of the scene. It's another thing to do that with the narrative and also the gameplay mechanics. You try to do them all, and in this game, I think we did a pretty good job of making sure that every level explores a slightly different facet of or aspect of the movement system. And all of that really is in service of creating memorable moments. I think that all of these things the movement mechanics, the atmosphere, the music, the narrative beats, they add together to create something memorable. And, so like the first time players ride on the big dolphin,
Yeah.
like that is so unexpected. It's such like, what, like I did not know this was going to be in this game. And like, I think that's just so exciting to see as a developer of the game, to see people having a really exciting moment that's fresh. And
Sure.
when you think back to your favorite games, that's what you remember. You remember those amazing moments in the games, and video games just as a medium are so potent in how they can create memorable moments. They
Yeah.
engage you so deeply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm curious, just for you on a personal level, what are some of those moments from your favorite games that you remember as like surprise moments of, I can't believe this is happening, that really stick with you?
Sometimes it's really small stuff, and sometimes it's like amazing stuff. One that was a reference inspiration for us for this game, in Wind Waker. The old Zelda game, where you're riding on the boat in the huge ocean. You're alone on that boat for hours.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's not a moment of that game. That's like a lot of that game.
That is most of that game, right? But I don't know if you remember, if you played it, but there's a brief section later in that game where another little character, this little girl, joins you and rides on the boat with you, and you take her to a dungeon, and she's like a companion character or something, and like just having that other character on the boat with you, even though it doesn't really change the mechanics of the boat or anything, it just makes a different feeling. So unexpected, but also so powerful to kind of have that contrast. It was so simple, but it made you care about this character. Yeah, that's one that stuck with me. And there's lots more, but yeah, you can clearly see parallels to that in the events that take place in Sword of the Sea. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Because and one thing that I don't think was shown at all in the marketing is that there is a second character in the story of Sword of the Sea, which, other than I guess like the like bird in the Pathless, is not really something that your other games have done. I mean, Journey had the asynchronous multiplayer, but it was a surprise moment, right? When you then it's this character that maybe you think is an antagonist in some way, that you think maybe you're going to fight, but then when you cooperate with them and you both ride on the sword, and my favorite little touch, and I was so happy when I realized this, was when I realized there's this moment when I was leaning the characters apart and that they were holding hands in the middle. And I thought that little touch of like connecting them this way, to your point, mechanically the sword doesn't really feel different when you're moving it back and forth. But as I was like slaloming and I saw them leaning apart and leaning together, but they had their hands gripped together, I thought that was a really interesting moment of animation that conveys narrative. It's something that most people probably won't even notice, but that attention to detail makes it very worth it to include that in the story, I think.
Totally, man. And I'm so glad you noticed that, because, we have this incredible animator. When I told him about this idea of like, okay, there's going to be a part where there's two characters riding, he's like, okay, that's going to be like, we're going to do all the animations again. Like you just doubled the animation workload for this game, and like, there's no reference, like nobody's like skateboarding or surfing on the same board. Like how do you do the tricks? Like, what is that? Like, we had to invent these skateboard animation tricks for two people, and like,
that's so funny.
It looks cool and it looks natural. You're just like, what? But like, it's insane. It's totally nuts. And what's really fun too is that not many people know about this, but there's a photo mode in the game, and so you can actually pause, and go in photo mode and like look at the poses and see them, and like you notice that one where they're holding hands, but there's like every single trick where they're flipping around each other. Like, the poses are so cool. So
yeah.
Yeah, it is really satisfying that we were able to get that in.
Yeah.
Happy about it.
No, it's awesome. And continue on the path of what the process is of designing, just the process of designing this game. One thing that is a core element of your games to this point is your collaboration with composer Austin Wintory, who has done scores of most, if not all, of these games that you've worked on.
Yeah, all of them, man.
Yeah. And so I've been hearing his music for a long time, as have you. And I'm curious how working with him, and especially how many times you've collaborated with him over the years, how does that impact the way that you're designing the game. You've worked together, you know his competence and abilities, he knows your design abilities. How has that grown over the course of working for the first time on things like Flower and Journey to, and you've known each other for decades at this
Yeah,
point?
yeah. Austin, he's just a genius. You know, he's an incredible composer and just has not only an amazing sense for music, but also for how it works in a video game. And
Yeah.
over the years, we've, had this kind of back and forth that we do, where I tell him about, hey, here's the concept before we even have imagery or anything. And then he'll play a little thing inspired by this idea. And then I'll be like, oh my God, I can see it, and like
Interesting.
it
Yeah.
becomes more clear in my mind because I heard his interpretation through the music.
I can feel the brainstorming sessions between the two of you getting really like excited.
It just goes back and forth, like, and then I'll go and I'll draw something while listening to the thing he made. And then I'll be like, here it is. And he'll be like, oh, I got to make a better one, And so like, it's
Fun.
just is like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And so it's really fun to bring him in early and have the music help kind of us find our way. And that's what happened on this project. He was in there real early. And what's amazing is on basically all of them, the very first thing that he plays is the thing. It's the main theme.
Sure,
like he nails it
yeah.
first try every single time. It's insane. We're always like, well, maybe this is a time where it takes a few tries,
Yeah.
Like, no, he got it again. So yeah, it's very cool. And oftentimes those pieces, like he elaborates on them and they become like the kind of trailer music, or they become the music that you hear on the PlayStation menu, when you select the game. Like those are the one in Journey. That's what that was. And same with Odyssey, really. It's the evolution of that's his very first idea. So
cool.
It's super inspiring to work with Austin.
So, what do you have an example of what one of those moments might be that turned into an element of imagery or color or something? I don't know what it is that his music inspired for, specifically Sword of the Sea, a way that the composition impacted the way you're designing the game.
Oh yeah, man. So like,
just one example of the many I'm sure there are.
There's so many. The music that you hear in the sections where the water comes back in the first level. I had this idea, like, you're going to make the world turn into water, but we didn't quite have that tech online. So it was still like, we have to have faith, And Austin wrote music for both states before we really had those visuals. And that just really clarified how it should look, how it should feel, what the atmosphere should be when the water returns. And those are some of my favorite bits of the music in the game. Is you complete both of those kind of halves of the first map, and you're just flowing, and the music is beautiful. And it really helped us figure out what the atmosphere and feel was going to be for the water returning. There's many more, but that one was just like really clear.
Yeah. One of the things that I think you were mentioning earlier is a core pillar of this game that we haven't really touched on, is the fact that the majority of the ground in this game is animated, is moving, is waves of sand and water at the same time.
Yep.
Surprisingly not making a like disgusting quicksand slurry, but instead staying apart like oil and water. What was that process like of designing a game with moving terrain, evolving terrain, dynamic terrain? Something that I haven't really seen be done before. How difficult was that? How did that impact the way you were designing levels?
It was one of like the biggest technical challenges that we decided to take on from day one. We knew that like, okay, this game is going to be like, the hard things are going to be getting that movement right, getting that terrain right. Those are going to be hard. And then there's a whole bunch that we didn't predict, but those ones were known from day one. And on the Pathless, we had this big island. It was like a single gigantic terrain. In this game, the shape of the terrain was not really, like, we didn't know the bounds. Like in the Pathless, it was like, okay, the island's going to be this big. We're going to keep changing how tall these mountains are and figure out the shape of it. But we know these are the bounds. And so we had to really change our production tools to allow us to model the terrain and figure out shapes that would work with many more kinds of odd silhouettes to the terrain.
Sure. Yeah.
And it had to be much more malleable. And then beyond that, how do you author the waves? Like, we know that we can get waves to scroll across it because we had early on, we got this tech to update the terrain continuously. And that was an amazing technical feat. But then the question was, okay, how do you tell the waves to be this tall or this shape or going this direction at this speed differently here
Yeah.
versus over here? You know, and so we tried to like map textures to it and project UVs and all this kind of stuff, and none of it worked. You know, it was really not until quite late that we realized, oh, we can essentially collage waves onto the
Okay.
terrain like stamps, and where these stamps overlap, they blend together, and we can rotate these stamps. Each stamp can have its own wave shape and its own speed, and that tech for stamping little detailed waves originally came in to create little ripples around the base of things. We're just going to stamp
Yeah.
ripples. But
Sure.
then we realized if we make really big ones of those,
Yeah.
we can define the entire wave surface with them. And it was like, wait, can we have like hundreds of those? Can we have thousands of those? Because that's what it would take to like define the entire terrain's waves, you know? And it was like, yeah, we could totally do that. And then we are like, okay, we can make this game.
Yeah. I guess that is a yes or no, or like a binary. If you can make this work, then the game's going to work. If you
Then
can't,
it's gonna work. Yeah.
then it's not. And you said that's been there since day one. And I'm curious when, for sort of the see when this day one for this game was. For you and your studio, does the process of making a game like this start before the release of the last game? Do you remember when that first Giant Squid sort of the sea meeting was? What year when that happened?
We have to think of the next concept before we finish the current one, because you know you got to keep the lights on, get it funded, and start working on it and try and keep everybody on board. And Pathless shipped during the pandemic in 2020, I think. We had the challenge of figuring out how to do that process at that time. And we started creating a prototype and pitching it around, and we were able to make a deal with PlayStation Indies, which is their internal group doing smaller games and stuff. But yeah, we started pretty much immediately after the Pathless ship. We gave everybody like a month off, and it was like, okay, let's get the thing going. And the first prototypes were like, we just were working in the Pathless, like it was like the same map, but like you could surf around on it. And then we were like, okay, we got a basic control like for the character. Now let's make our own thing. And
yeah. One of the biggest production changes, it seems to me, on the outside, looking at sort of the seas, this is the first game that you guys have self-published. You said that Sony was involved in some capacity, which I'm curious to ask on a bit. But when you decided, or I don't know how it was decided, but that you were going to self-publish for the first time, as opposed to 505 for Abzu and Annapurna for the Pathless. What was that decision like? How did that impact the studio? And then what was kind of the most difficult thing that you had to learn as the head of a studio than self-publishing a game for the first time?
Yeah, when we decided to go that way for this project, a lot of people were saying like, you got to watch out. You got to, you don't know what you don't know. And, especially near the end during ship time, that's when you're going to kind of find out, what it takes. And they're absolutely right. It's a big challenge, but it also has a lot of benefits. You have a lot of control of how the game comes out, the storefronts, and just all that technical stuff about releasing a game out into the world. You got to take care of your PR, and Jackie's doing a great job, but you got to take care of a lot of things, your QA, your localization,
Of course, yeah.
And all these things that typically publishers help you out with.
They've got a system in place. Now you have to make the system.
Exactly. And so luckily we were able to navigate that and, work with some really talented external QA and localization teams. And we also kind of did a smaller release than last time in terms of the number of platforms. Like, this game isn't coming out on the iPhone,
Did Pathless release on mobile?
Dude, it was
really?
on mobile.
I didn't know
it was insane. That was one of the craziest things we've ever done. That game was originally going to be a PS4 game, and it was developed with that in mind, then halfway through, we were like, oh, PS5 is coming out. We're going to be a launch title. We were a launch title for
And you did
PS5.
that.
And then Apple Arcade was a new thing. And the people at Apple saw it and they were super excited about it. They're like, we want this on Apple Arcade. And I was like, oh man, that's crazy. But we somehow said yes. And all of a sudden we were shipping on uh, all of these things,
Yeah.
and then we did a Switch port and an Xbox port and everything. And it's everywhere, man. But what's funny was people thought like, oh, it's a mobile game. It was a PS5 launch title that we had to like make work on a phone.
Yeah.
The fact that it shipped and they were all to come out basically at the same time, um, so much work. It was nuts.
Yeah.
So yeah, we were like, let's not do that. Let's keep it simple. We're first time self publishing. Let's do
Sure.
PS5. Let's do Steam, and we were able to handle that. So yeah.
Yeah. And then finally, I'm curious to dig into what you mentioned about Sony being supporting the game in some way. What was that relationship like? How were they involved in the process of this game and making it what it was? Because it was funny actually watching the credits. It was like Giant Squid team, and then boom, Sony Interactive Entertainment. Like, oh, hey,
Yeah.
look at
Yeah,
that,
they're right there, man. Yeah, they saw the early prototypes we were making. They heard the pitch. They believed in it. They funded this project. They made it happen. They helped us survive this really difficult time in the industry for small teams. And the fact that this game came out is because they continued to believe in it. Every game at first requires that leap of faith, like I was talking about, because you're signing up for something that is still just a description and some concept art. And then halfway through, you're still building it. It's not doesn't feel right yet. I'm saying like, look, with a little more polish, the movement's going to feel good. You got to believe me, and like there's this moment where it still requires faith. And they kept believing through that tough middle section. And then when it finally, started to come together and make sense, it's so rewarding. And so the way that they work with us is they really put trust in us, and they reviewed the build every month, every milestone, and gave us feedback. But it was never like, hey, you got to do something different. Like they were like, here's what we think, let's see how it goes. And so very, very constructive and a great relationship. So very happy with it.
That's definitely a unique relationship as well. I mean, the amount of teams you get to have a funder who's not publishing the game but is still giving feedback. It's a distinct dynamic there that you don't see very often.
Yeah, and they're invested in the game. They want it to be great because it's one of their PlayStation Indies titles, and that every game that they do under that kind of label, I guess, is
it's a secret label.
Yeah, right. And they're kind of a really neat group of projects that are pushing the envelope and trying to do something artsy and cool. And so yeah, it was really nice to be included in their curated kind of list of studios.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and especially because it is a full circle moment in some way of the initial That Game Company games, of which you worked on, were published by Sony and were funded by them initially, and so you've gone full circle from where you started with That Game Company, Flower Flow, Journey, and now PlayStation helping support it. And I don't know anything about this, but is there any connection there from when you were in some way working with Sony in the late 2000s all the way to now? Is there some through line there?
Yeah, they have consistently trusted in me and these kind of smaller art games, and there's always been there's turnover there, new people come and go in the department, but the thing that has persisted is this faith in these smaller games. And so yeah, they've been a wonderful supporter for Giant Squid through the entirety of our existence. And one thing that I'll never forget is when we did Abzu, is starting the new studio, and they got our trailer on the E3 stage show.
That's right.
Back when E3 stage shows were still a thing. and they put it out there, man, in their big, most central moment, and that really kicked it off for us. So yeah, really cool to continue working with them.
Yeah. Well, the final thing before we say goodbye is we're gonna do a little picking moments game here. I want you, no matter how challenging this is going to be, to pick your favorite moment from Abzu, the Pathless, and Sword of the Sea. Whether it's a musical moment, a moment of imagery, a set piece that you made. Let's go through it one by one. I guess starting with Abzu. What is your favorite moment in Abzu?
Oh man, very tough question, but I'll say that I think in Abzu, when you go down with the whales and there's the music, it's kind of like this ballet music. I just loved that coming together, seeing that moment come together.
Yeah. That wide shot with the gigantic whales where you
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love that.
And just a really fun one to build and to see players enjoy it. A lovely time. In the Pathless, I think the very final boss scene in that game was just over the top in a really fun way. And the story with that is that I drew the final boss character. I was like, oh, it'd be so cool if we did this, but this is just like an idea. It's not, we don't really have time or scope or bandwidth to do this. Like, it's just a fun idea. And then the team was like, no, we're doing it, and we did it.
That's awesome.
It turned out rad. And then in Sword of the Sea, really hard to say because we've just seen people play it for a few days. But the moments that I really love are those kind of moments of discovery where you realize, oh, I could do that jump,
Sure.
And that kind of happens in a few places in the game. But when seeing people realize that wherever they do, that's just a really fun moment to see for games.
What's great about those three things you picked is that I think each of those highlight what each of those games do best. In Abzu, it's the atmosphere. It's the serenity of swimming alongside those whales. In the Pathless, it's the high moments of kinetic tension and flashy colors and the explosions and trees and all that stuff.
Yeah,
and then in Sword of the Sea, it's the movement. And that's the thing that you guys really honed in on in this one. So in some way, the games, their creative process, and then even what sticks with you from them are what the creative forces between each of those were and the different pillars that they kind of represent.
Absolutely, man. And that's one of the wonderful things about games is that everybody takes away something different from it. They all have their own unique takeaway, and that is so special. And it's so fun to put the game together with our own kind of idea of how people will experience it, and then see how people interpret that and see how they have a variation of that. So yeah, love making games.
Absolutely. And I love playing them. I love talking about them. So thank you very much for making a game that I played that I really, really enjoyed, for sitting down and talking to me. I could feel each of us getting excited about each of the things we were talking about. So had a great time talking to you. Hope you got something out of it as well. And thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.